You are listening to the It's Logical podcast, episode 11, Evil. When I was a child chasing fireflies in the velvety hush of a Midwestern summer, evil wore a rubber mask. It prowled the cartoons that flickered across our console television, all claws and glowing eyes, waiting for parental lights out so it could creep beneath the bed and rattle the box springs. Sunday school upgraded the threat. Now a sulfur-scented devil perched on one shoulder and a white-robed angel on the other, each lobbying my conscience like rival campaign managers. By adolescence, the gallery of candidates had multiplied. Gory villains from slasher films, nuclear warheads ticking on nightly news, gossip about satanic lyrics hidden backward in heavy metal songs. Their variety confused me, but a single promise bound them. If I failed to steer clear, I would pay. So I began to wonder whether the word evil named a universal substance, or merely our fear of hurtful deeds. One day I resolved to trace the oldest footprints, follow them out of childhood shadows, and see whether anything measurable remained once every costume was stripped away. The earliest written laws already reveal anxiety about transgression that exceeds mere illegality. Around 2100 BCE, scribes in Ur carved the code of Ur-Nammu onto clay. Some clauses simply protect property. If a man commits a robbery, he shall be killed. Yet others invoke divine disorder. A sorceress must be drowned for casting spells. Evil, in that Mesopotamian frame, is not just harmful behavior. It is an affront to the gods who underwrite civilization's fragile order. Egyptian theology agreed. In funerary papyri, the newly dead recite 42 denials, never plotting murder, never defrauding granaries, never causing pain, to persuade Osiris that they avoided Isfet, chaos. Should their heart weigh heavy with wrongdoing on the scales, the crocodile-faced Ammit would devour it, erasing them from rebirth. Here we glimpse an early pattern. Communities project dread onto cosmic canvases to reinforce social codes that curb violence and preserve grain. As literacy spread around the Mediterranean, philosophers began probing whether divine wrath was necessary to explain cruelty. Hesiod blamed Pandora's curious fingers for loosing disease and toil upon humankind. Yet when Herodotus chronicled Persian king Cambyses desecrating Egyptian temples, he used the word hybris, overweening pride, as if moral disaster grows from psychological excess, not literal demons. Socrates argued that no one knowingly chooses evil, wrongdoing sprouts from ignorance of the good. Plato countered that the tripartite soul can fall out of harmony, desire overruling reason. Aristotle, thinking more like a physician, prescribed practical virtues. Cultivate the habit of temperance and you will not slide into vicious extremes. Mythic imagery survived. Furies still scourged perjury and tragedies, but the conceptual spotlight inched from supernatural invasion to mismanaged mind. Hebrew scriptures amplified the adversarial dimension. The Book of Job portrays the Satan roaming earth to test integrity, implying evil can masquerade as heavenly auditor. Intertestamental texts escalate the stakes. A rebellion in heaven births a legion of fallen angels who teach sorcery and warfare, corrupting human hearts. Early Christian writers blended this with Greco-Roman demonology. By late antiquity, St. Augustine spoke of a metaphysical infection spread by Adam's disobedience. Original sin impaired every will, making evil a hereditary defect. So while Greek ethicists emphasized ignorance, Augustine painted wickedness as privatio boni, the absence of good, caused by a catastrophic cosmic lapse. In Persia, another solution emerged: Zoroaster's dualism. The universe is a battlefield where Ahura Mazda's truth wrestles Angra Mainyu's lie. Human actors lend their choices to either side. This vision proved remarkably adhesive. When Manichaeism later swept from Mesopotamia to North Africa, it offered converts a tidy diagram of cosmic conflict and moral clarity. Yet dualism also bred fatalism. If darkness and light are co-eternal, perhaps some souls are predestined to malevolence. That suspicion would haunt Europe during inquisitions a millennium later. Medieval Christendom institutionalized demonology with bureaucratic rigor. Manuals like the Malleus Maleficarum cataloged witches' alleged pacts, prescribing torture to extract confession. The Church's logic was circular. Evidence of diabolical plots justified harsher measures, which in turn proved the threat's seriousness. Between 1450 and 1750, roughly 45,000 Europeans, most of them women, were executed for sorcery. Historians now trace spikes in trials to crop failures, plagues, and wars, periods when communal anxiety demanded scapegoats. Evil became a social safety valve, venting fear onto the vulnerable. Yet dissent simmered. Erasmus ridiculed scholastic hair-splitting about demons, urging Christians to seek inner reform. Martin Luther shattered papal monopoly on defining sin by declaring Scripture the only authority. The Reformation's bloodshed, however, soon revealed that purging evil in the name of purity breeds familiar horrors. Massacres from the Peasants' War to the 30 Years' War littered Central Europe. Exhausted, philosophers of the Enlightenment sought instead a moral grammar rooted in reason. Baruch Spinoza denied free-floating malevolence altogether. Evil, he wrote, is merely what contradicts our interests. David Hume replaced divine command theory with sentiment. We call actions evil because they disgust or harm us, not because the heavens thunder. Science offered new leverage. When Charles Darwin proposed natural selection in 1859, virtue and vice could be recast as survival strategies. Cooperation enhances group fitness. Aggression secures territory. Empathy may have arisen to nurture offspring. Herbert Spencer extrapolated crudely, justifying colonial domination as evolution's engine, yet evolutionary psychologists today study altruism and cruelty empirically. One experiment at the University of Zurich found that participants punished cheaters in public goods games even at personal cost, suggesting morality polices freeloaders to safeguard cooperation. But the same impulse can warp into ethnic violence when propaganda tags whole populations as parasites. Criminology's first self-styled scientist, Cesare Lombroso, argued in 1876 that criminals are anthropological throwbacks identifiable by jawlines and cranial bumps. His born criminal theory soon failed under statistical scrutiny, yet his hunger for biological markers persists in modern neuroimaging. Researchers at King's College London used diffusion tensor imaging to show reduced fractional anisotropy, less white matter integrity, in the uncinate fasciculus of violent offenders. This tract links the amygdala, emotion, to the orbitofrontal cortex, decision, so faulty wiring may dull anticipatory fear. Other studies implicate low resting heart rate and hypoarousal. Individuals who feel muted internal alarms may seek thrills by flouting norms. Importantly, such correlates forecast risk, but not destiny. Most people with blunted amygdala response never assault anyone, proving again that evil, however operationalized, resists monocausal formulas. Social context powerfully modulates those biological susceptibilities. Philip Zimbardo's 1971 prison simulation remains infamous. 24 Stanford students randomly assigned guard or prisoner roles internalized the script so completely that guards invented humiliations, forcing inmates to strip, clean toilets with bare hands within 36 hours. Zimbardo terminated the study early, concluding that environment can tilt otherwise decent individuals toward brutality. Critics later faulted methodological laxity, yet decades of follow-up experiments confirm core findings. In 2015, French broadcast Le Jeu de la Mort replicated Milgram's obedience shocks as game show theater. 81% of contestants delivered maximal jolts while a chanting audience egged them on. Cameras captured smiles of nervous relief when they were finally told the victim was an actor. The spell of authority dissolved, and ordinary conscience resurfaced. Hannah Arendt, reporting on Nazi bureaucrat Adolf Eichmann's trial, coined banality of evil to describe how genocide can hinge on men who file travel vouchers more often than they fire guns. Eichmann insisted he merely followed orders, trafficking Jews to death camps with the same diligence he once applied to timetables. Scholars debated Arendt's portrait, but archives reveal thousands of mid-level clerks, engineers, and bookkeepers whose logistical skills oiled industrial murder. Their ordinariness signals a sobering truth. Extraordinary evil may require no monstrous psychology, only a system that rewards obedience and masks consequences. Debunking folklore that clouds these dynamics is vital. Consider lycanthropy. From medieval France to early modern Germany, villagers swore they saw men transform into wolves and devour children. Physicians now recognize clinical lycanthropy as a rare psychiatric delusion tied to psychosis, while zoologists note that rabid wolves in the 14th century ranged widely, attacking humans and fueling legend. Similarly, tales of devilish music hypnotizing teens resurfaced in the 1980s Satanic Panic. Prosecutions of daycare workers for ritual abuse collapsed when forensic interviews proved contaminated by leading questions. A 2016 review in the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry found zero physical evidence of organized satanic cults harvesting infants. Yet the panic shaped policing protocols for years, teaching how moral crusades can eclipse facts. Other misconceptions concern statistical frequency. News broadcasts often imply that child abduction by strangers is rampant. The U.S. Department of Justice tallied 115 such cases nationwide in 2023, tragic but vastly outnumbered by domestic abuse, homicides, and neglect, harms less likely to feed horror narratives. Policy that targets rare, spectacular crimes can divert funds from everyday prevention. Still, puzzles gnaw at researchers. Why do some atrocity survivors transcend vengeance? Neuroscientist Richard Davidson scanned Tibetan monks who had endured Chinese prisons. Their brains lit up in areas linked to compassion when recalling tormentors. Neuroplasticity apparently allows deliberate training to override trauma's default imprint. Conversely, why does intergroup hatred escalate with minimal differences? Henry Tajfel's minimal group experiments showed that schoolboys randomly labeled overestimators or underestimators of dot clusters quickly favored their own group with higher payouts. From playground to parliament, tribal circuitry flares at trivial cues, a bias that propagandists exploit. Algorithms on social media amplify outrage because it boosts engagement time, indirectly monetizing division. When bots promote conspiracy theories about vaccines containing microchips, the cascade can sabotage public health, inflicting tangible death, an evil born not of claws or horns, but of code optimized for ad impressions. At the frontier of biology, geneticists study polymorphisms like MAOAL, nicknamed the warrior gene, associated with aggressive response when combined with childhood maltreatment. Yet twin studies reveal resilience pathways too. Epigenetic tags can switch off pro-inflammatory genes in children who receive stable caregiving, buffering against antisocial outcomes. Interventions such as nurse-family partnership, providing at-risk mothers with home visits, cut juvenile arrests by nearly 50% over 15 years. Each saved felony represents a quantifiable chunk of prevented suffering, proof that policy grounded in developmental science shrinks evil's footprint. Legal scholars debate how such findings should alter culpability. Some propose a neuroprobabilistic model, weighting sentencing toward rehabilitation when biology constrains choice. Others warn that excusing harm on neural grounds risks deterministic fatalism. Courts inch cautiously forward. In 2024, the Supreme Court of Canada admitted neuroimaging to argue diminished impulse control in a teen homicide, shortening parole ineligibility but not overturning guilt. Society, it seems, will grapple for decades with how to integrate brain scans without eroding responsibility. Corporate spheres generate their own style of moral blindness. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon rig exploded after managers ignored multiple pressure test warnings to avoid costly delay. 11 workers died, ecosystems suffocated. Investigations uncovered a decision matrix that monetized risk. Every 10-hour schedule slip cost BP over $1 million. When quarterly bonuses loom larger than distant wetlands, spreadsheets can launder lethal choices into mere numbers. Economists call it moral distancing. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas might say the face of the other, the irreducible claim of another's vulnerability, was hidden behind Excel cells, enabling evil by abstraction. Climate change magnifies this calculus. Extractive industries continue subsidizing misinformation campaigns even as heat waves kill tens of thousands annually. future historians may judge knowingly accelerating planetary destabilization as a collective crime eclipsing any medieval atrocity. Already, international lawyers draft frameworks to criminalize ecocide, aligning environmental devastation with genocide under Rome Statute revisions. Whether tribunals emerge depends on geopolitical will, but the conversation underscores that contemporary evil often masquerades as business as usual. Technology's horizon complicates further. Deep learning systems can now synthesize lifelike voices that mimic public figures. In 2025, several electoral districts faced viral deepfake videos depicting candidates uttering racist slurs. Forensic lab whitelists eventually debunked them, yet polls showed lasting damage. Malevolent actors thus weaponize AI to erode trust, the social glue enabling cooperation, without firing a shot. Countermeasures involve cryptographic watermarks and media literacy campaigns, but the arms race between fakery and verification will likely intensify. Cybersecurity analysts also warn of synthetic relationships, in which chatbots groom lonely individuals, steering them toward extremist forums. Because the bot adapts to each user's lexicon, it slips under cognitive defenses, a sinister acceleration of echo chamber logic. Regulators debate whether algorithm designers bear liability for downstream radicalization. Some parallels to 1990s gun industry lawsuits appear. Plaintiffs argued manufacturers knowingly flooded crime-ridden markets. If juries decide that code, like hardware, can be negligently distributed, a new deterrent against digital malevolence may emerge. While legislators struggle, grassroots interventions continue. Bystander training workshops teach high schoolers how to interrupt bullying without escalating risk. Randomized trials in Finland showed a 40% drop in playground victimization when peers, not teachers, delivered disapproval. The mechanism is simple. Cruelty seeks audience approval. Remove that oxygen and the flame gutters out. Similar principles inform cure violence programs where former gang members mediate conflicts on city streets, reframing retaliation as contagion, detect, interrupt, treat. Chicago neighborhoods hosting such mediators documented 56% reductions in shootings within 18 months, illustrating how reframing evil as preventable behavior opens pragmatic solutions. Religion, long charged with policing evil, adapts too. Many contemporary theologians emphasize structural sin, systems that perpetuate poverty, racism, exploitation, over demonic personifications. Liberation theologians in Latin America argue that ignoring institutional injustice while exorcising demons is like mopping the floor while the tap still runs. Meanwhile, Buddhist thinkers discuss kleshas, mental afflictions such as greed and hatred, using mindfulness techniques to short-circuit harmful impulses before they mature into action. Neuroscientists at the University of Wisconsin measured gamma band activity in monks practicing compassion meditation. Heightened synchrony correlated with increased altruistic giving in economic games. Thus, contemplative traditions may supply empirical tools for cultivating neural antidotes to cruelty. Philosophical analysis continues refining language. Kant introduced the notion of radical evil, the capacity to subordinate moral law to self-interest even with full awareness. He insisted this disposition lurks in every rational agent, upending complacent binaries of good people and monsters. Nietzsche challenged that dichotomy differently, labeling Christian condemnation of instinct a resentment against life's vitality. He feared moralizing could itself become a kind of sickness. 20th century existentialists added freedom's burden. We create values through choice, so evading responsibility by blaming devils is, for Jean-Paul Sartre, a form of bad faith. Each perspective reshapes prevention strategies. Should societies nurture healthy outlets for aggression, or erect categorical imperatives that forbid certain acts regardless of context? No survey is complete without confronting randomness. In April 2023, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake leveled towns in Turkey and Syria, crushing over 50,000 lives. Plates shifted indifferent to ethics, yet survivors wrestled theodicy. Why should innocent children suffocate under rubble while corrupt officials sip tea? Some conclude such suffering falsifies benevolent deity claims. Others find meaning in collective aid. Cognitive scientists note that assigning intent, even to tectonics, helps minds pattern chaos. Yet conflating tragedy with moral evil can misdirect rage towards scapegoats. That caution loops back to my own advocacy. Working with adults who are blind, I witness how bureaucratic indifference, missed Braille labels on medication, inaccessible websites for job applications, curtails autonomy daily. No villain twirls a mustache, yet the effect resembles classic cruelty, deprivation of agency. Evil, under my pragmatic definition, can thrive in inertia as surely as in malice. Recognizing this shifts emphasis from hunting monsters to auditing systems. Evidence supports systemic reform. When the United Kingdom adopted the Equality Act's accessibility mandates, employment among workers with disabilities rose 8% in 5 years. Conversely, states that tightened ballot box restrictions without accommodating voters with mobility impairments saw turnout gaps widen. Policy levers clearly modulate harm. Each legislative session becomes a moral laboratory. Neuroscience corroborates policy's ripple effects. Chronic stress from discrimination elevates cortisol, shrinking hippocampal volume and impairing memory. A 2022 study of marginalized youth found that participants who moved into resource-rich neighborhoods via housing vouchers displayed partial reversal of stress biomarkers within 2 years. Translation: remove oppressive structures, and biology can heal. The expanding toolkit, MRI scanners, machine learning risk scores, restorative circles, may tempt us to think the mystery is nearly solved. Yet frontier questions loom. Could neuromodulation therapies, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, one day dampen violent urges without blunting free will? If gene editing can ease Huntington's, might it also adjust aggression pathways? Bioethicists warn of paternalistic abuse, whose brain chemistry gets rewritten, and by which moral metric. History teaches that crusades to eradicate evil frequently commit their own atrocities. Art reminds us of subtlety science cannot graph. In Toni Morrison's Beloved, Seth murders her infant rather than let slave catchers claim her. The act chills readers, yet emerges from love warped by terror. Is it evil? The novel refuses tidy verdicts, insisting that reckoning with cruelty requires inhabiting stories, not only tallying harms. Likewise, Picasso's Guernica depicts the bombing's anguish without portraying a single pilot, indicting systems, not caricatures. Storytelling therefore complements data by restoring individual texture to abstract statistics. So, 45 centuries after Urnamu's chisels, what endures? First, the horned caricature cannot withstand scrutiny. History shows harm arises most often from ordinary impulses amplified by context. Second, biology and socialization interact in tangled feedback loops. Predispositions seek triggers, environments unlock genes. Third, prevention trumps punishment. Early childhood support, equitable institutions, transparent algorithms, empathy training, and civic vigilance all measurably shrink violence. Fourth, humility is mandatory. Every cure can backfire when animated by self-righteous certainty. If evil is ultimately the deliberate or negligent infliction of unnecessary suffering, then combating it is less an exorcism than a project in design. We can blueprint schools that teach critical thinking, craft economies that lift without exploiting, deploy technology that informs rather than manipulates. None of this guarantees utopia. Choice remains, entropy persists, earthquakes will still strike. But each informed adjustment squeezes the space where malevolence breeds. The monster under my childhood bed has long since evaporated, but a subtler hazard lingers. The urge to demonize instead of diagnose, to chant incantations instead of analyze incentives, to curse darkness instead of wire up another street lamp. Yet every time a policy reduces lead in water or an app warns a teenager about suicidal ideation, a portion of preventable suffering evaporates. Those victories seldom make primetime news, but they redraw the map of possibility. Search the annals of myth, the grooves of cortex, the archives of courts, and one lesson echoes. Evil's power depends on mystique. Strip away the mystique with methodical inquiry, and its stature shrinks. That relentless curiosity, testing claims, measuring outcomes, revising approaches, is our species' best talisman. Whenever we doubt its worth, we can recall how many once terrifying specters, witches blighting crops, devils stirring plagues, dissolved the moment evidence entered the room. The journey continues. New disguises of harm will emerge as fast as technology fashions them. But armed with data, empathy, historic memory, and the courage to reform flawed systems, we are not helpless. Each generation can choose, again and again, to reduce the radius of cruelty. Such incremental triumphs rarely feel epic, yet accumulate into civilizational arcs that tomorrow's children may mistake for the natural order. If so, that will be our quiet legacy. We saw the shape in the dark, named it plainly, and built lamps instead of idols. In the end, the lamp is brighter. After all, it's logical to search for the truth,